Mozzarella sticks at home, just the way you remember having them at restaurants growing up, is way too easy to make and to store in the freezer for you to not be making them at home. However, there are a few tricks and secrets to making them properly, and that's what we're gonna cover in today's video. But first, I wanna thank our sponsor today, BetterHelp, but more on them later. For now, let's just get into making restaurant-style mozzarella sticks. So here I have a basic breading station. One bowl has some flour, about a cup or two, another with some eggs, maybe 4, and I wanna beat them really well. I don't want any stringy egg white in there. And in another bowl, some Italian seasoned breadcrumbs and some panko. I usually always use a blend of the two, but depending on the dish, I use a different ratio. For this dish, I'm going 2 parts of the fine Italian breadcrumbs, 1 part panko, because the mozzarella needs to be completely encased, and the fine breadcrumbs actually help do it better than the coarser panko. But that panko adds a mega crunch, so we like to add both. Now here we have our 3-stage breading station. I've just got a whole bunch of flour, a whole bunch of egg, and a whole bunch of breadcrumbs, probably double what I would normally have because I'm double dipping, which is one of the first tricks. Since it's harder to coat a mozzarella stick, you want a little bit more of the finer breadcrumb, but you still like that panko for a nice crunch. And then to all of those bowls, we're gonna add a little bit of salt, and I like to add a little bit of Italian seasoning as well. Then we can set those bowls aside and talk about the mozzarella. And I don't know this for the fact, but I'm pretty sure the invention of string cheese plus the invention of mozzarella sticks coincided. This perfect shape just lent itself to somebody battering it and frying it in America, which is why it's not really an Italian thing. This is purely an American invention. Now there's always a way to elevate this dish with fresh mozzarella, but it is a bit trickier. That mozzarella melts a bit slower than this cheese. You can use fresh mozzarella. Only thing is it can't be too wet. If it's wet, you gotta dry it out a bit. But if we just pat it dry, this is gonna work for fried mozzarella. The only problem is you could potentially cut this too thick. So when you go to fry it, the outside browns too fast, but the fresh mozzarella doesn't melt fast enough. But today, we're just gonna focus on the string cheese. You can toss those straight into that flour dredge. Once they're in the flour dredge and coated in that flour, you really wanna make sure you pat that excess off really well. You only really just want the lightest layer of flour wrapping around all the mozzarella sticks. Then you want to transfer them directly into the egg, and you really want to make sure that the egg is coating the mozzarella sticks. Sometimes it looks like it's well coated, but if you run your hand through it, that egg kind of pulls away and reveals a dry spot. Then a few sticks at a time, you want to remove from the egg and let that excess egg drain off. And I'm going to toss the mozzarella sticks, lightly pressing the breadcrumbs into the mozzarella sticks, rotating them, sprinkling the breadcrumbs on top, just really taking some time to make sure every inch of that mozzarella stick is coated in a layer of breadcrumbs. This brings us to the first real secret of this method, which is double breading the mozzarella sticks. The proper technique to do this would be to let this first layer of breading set in the refrigerator so it doesn't slide off during the second breading. But I was lazy, so I skipped that step. The next trick is popping this in the freezer, because that mozzarella is going to cook too fast, faster than the outside is going to brown. So by putting it in the freezer, we're kind of slowing it down so that it's perfectly melted when the outside is perfectly brown. Now before we move on to the recipe, I gotta talk about mental health thanks to our sponsor today, BetterHelp. Now I gotta admit it, the last year was mentally taxing for me, on top of the fact that the last 5 years was just hard rebuilding a life from scratch. So to make sure I stay mentally fresh and clear, I've been using a therapist at BetterHelp to help me talk through some things, which has been extraordinarily helpful. BetterHelp offers licensed therapists who are trained to listen and help you work through whatever you got going on. I've been to in-person therapists before and I've hated waiting in the waiting room. Appointments are always late, it feels like, and it's just kind of a big to-do. But with BetterHelp, you've got options that fit your schedule. Once you're matched with a therapist, you can schedule video or phone sessions, or you can send unlimited messages whenever you want. Plus, if you don't love your therapist, you can request a new one immediately and at any time. So if you want to join the over 2 million people who have taken control of their mental health, BetterHelp is giving my audience 10% off their first month if you go to the link at the top of the description or go to betterhelp.com/notanothercookingshow. Get matched with a therapist today, and let's just jump right back into the recipe. Now while that cheese firms up in the freezer, we can get started on our weekday sauce, which is gonna act as the marinara. Basically, the way I think of marinara sauce is just kind of like a slightly more spiced, more herbaceous weekday sauce, which is my basic tomato sauce. So instead of just going olive oil, basil, garlic, and tomatoes. I'll add some chili flake. I'll add a little bit of Italian seasoning, some dried basil, some dried oreganos, and some dried thyme. Now I just got 128-ounce can of my favorite tomatoes, Bianco di Napoli. Then you want to process those tomatoes through the food mill, trying to extract as much puree from the tomatoes as you can, making sure to scrape down the pulp that accumulated on the underside of the food mill, and then try and repeat one last time to get every last ounce out of those plum tomatoes. Set that off to the side. Next, I've got 3 garlic cloves that I'm going to slice them in half and then into very thin slices, and get those into a little bowl and set those off to the side. Now on over to the stove, we're ready to make weekday marinara sauce. We're gonna get a large, wide frying pan on medium-high heat and allow it to preheat for about a minute or 2. You could use a pot, but if you go with a wider cooking surface like this large, wide pan, you're gonna reduce this sauce a lot faster than you would in a pot. Once hot, add just enough oil to very thinly coat the bottom of the pan, and then add the basil stems and the sliced garlic. And we're gonna hit that with a little touch of salt, and we just wanna cook that, and then we wanna infuse that garlic and basil flavor into the oil, which is what will ultimately flavor my sauce. You could lightly saute the garlic until translucent, or you could slightly brown the garlic. Each way will bring out a different flavor in the sauce, and you should find which one you like best for different scenarios. But I like to lightly brown that garlic, and once I see that beginning to happen, I'm gonna kill the heat momentarily. Allow that pan to cool slightly, and then I'm gonna add the tomatoes. That pan is really hot, so allowing the pan to cool will prevent a violent simmer when the tomatoes hit the pan. So once the tomatoes are in, we want to season it with salt and some Italian seasoning, or simply oregano if that's all you have. And then we want to reduce that sauce to a thicker consistency. There is some water in these tomatoes, and the act of cooking the sauce is meant to evaporate that moisture and reduce and concentrate that tomatoey flavor, and make it thick enough to coat the mozzarella sticks when dipped. We can set it off to the side and keep that warm while we get a medium-sized pot on medium heat, and we want to fill that with about 24 ounces of a high smoke point oil like canola oil or avocado oil. And we want to allow that to slowly come up to a frying temperature of about 350 degrees Fahrenheit. And we want to make sure we're keeping the mozzarella sticks in the freezer this entire time until right before we're going to drop them in the fryer. Once the frying oil has reached our target temperature, we're going to pull about 4 mozzarella sticks out of the freezer at a time, and we're going to drop them into the oil. The oil temp should drop immediately, so you're going to want to raise the heat to high to get that oil to recover and to not drop down too low. Keeping the oil in the range of about 340 to 355 degrees Fahrenheit should result in a properly browned exterior and a properly melted cheesy interior. It should take about 2 to 3 minutes, and usually once you see the slightest sign of the cheese seeming like it wants to bust out of the breading, get them out of the oil immediately to avoid what we like to refer to in the biz as a blowout. Let them cool on a wire rack, season it slightly with some salt, and then go through frying the rest of the mozzarella sticks in batches. As soon as you've got all the mozzarella sticks fried, do not mess around. You want to eat these immediately. Tell me what's better than a good mozzarella stick. And I promise they're better than a restaurant. Recipe's gonna be down in the description. That's all that I have today. I'll see you next time. Until then, take care of yourself and go feed yourself.